Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, host of the Riderflex podcast and founder and CEO of our day job recruiting firm, Riderflex. We hope you enjoy this episode. And as a reminder, please subscribe to the podcast for updates and news. Finally, if you haven't already, check out the series of books we've published on hiring, interviewing, and overall career advice titled The Riderflex Guide, available on Amazon. And now, a quick word from our sponsor.
Most homeowners don't have the time or expertise to properly take care of their home, which causes costly issues to arise. That's where Kira Home Maintenance comes in. We're a full-service, routine maintenance company that was developed by a certified home inspector. Each quarter, we service our clients' homes following manufacturer's recommendations to properly maintain all the necessary appliances. We provide the materials and expertise to prolong the life of your property, creating a healthy and efficient environment for your family. From top to bottom, we'll maintain and service your home. To get started, we have a property inspection to determine what needs to be maintained, and a maintenance plan is created based on your preferences. From refrigerator coils to filters, vents, and drains, we do it all, and we do it well. Contact us today for your free routine maintenance inspection, and never worry about your maintenance again.
All right, Alex Steinman on the Riderflex podcast. Hello, Alex. How are you?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for getting this thing scheduled. I'm anxious to find out about Coven and find out the whole story. But before that, I want to know about Alex, the person. I want to know what's going on with Alex. Tell me, Alex. Let's start from the beginning. Where are you from? Give me some family history, parents, siblings. Give me some early stuff.
For sure. Well, I'm an only child, so no siblings, but lots and lots of friends who I consider family. My parents and I grew up in the suburbs of the Twin Cities in Minnesota. That's where my company is based, and that's where I've kind of been most of my life. I've done a lot of traveling, but have always found roots here. My dad was in the military when I was born, so I was actually born in Germany, which is kind of a fun fact, but I remember nothing because we moved back when I was 2. And the rest is history, growing up kind of in the Twin Cities area. So I have a deep love for Minnesota. I met my husband in high school, and we have been together since then. We got married after college. We both went to the University of Minnesota, and I studied journalism and advertising and public relations, and started my career really early in the advertising industry and PR. So I've been kind of in that creative industry for a really long time before starting my business, which I know we'll talk about. But on top of being married to my high school sweetheart, we went to prom together.
Cool.
We have 2 amazing children, which you can see behind me, Cooper and Zoe. Zoe is 7 and Cooper is 9. So I stay really busy as a entrepreneur and a mom, but we do our best. My husband's also an entrepreneur, so we have a really interesting life of of new businesses and growing businesses, and I hope that we're sharing some of that insight and not driving our kids crazy. I'm sure some of it will send them to therapy someday, but hopefully they'll take something good out of it.
I'm curious, did your mom and dad meet while he was stationed in Germany? Is that where they met, or they were married before?
They were married. Well, they got married so that my mom could go to Germany with him and stay with him. So they met in college. They both went to a small school in Fargo Moorhead area.
Okay. Oh, okay. Cool. And what'd your mom do?
My mom has worked in government for a really long time. She was a corrections officer, so really helping people have re-enter after coming out of prison or coming out of a sentence. And now she works for Hennepin County in the public defender's office, kind of post her federal retirement. So now she's doing a lot of county work. And my dad has been a number of things, but his life's work is kind of around healthcare and insurance. And so he was a financial planner for a while, but has worked in the insurance business, and now has worked with a lot of different startups on their sales teams. And he has a real passion for making sure that we're connecting all communities to better healthcare solutions, because I don't know if you know, but our healthcare system is pretty messed up.
Yeah.
So he's found a passion in there, and has an entrepreneurial spirit, has owned his own businesses in the past too. So learned a lot from him.
Very cool. So the reason I ask about the parents is because usually it kind of bleeds into what you end up
Mhm.
becoming. So now I know where the entrepreneurial bug came from.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I've had, by the way, speaking of your mom and helping people re-enter the workforce after being incarcerated, for what I don't know, it just happened. I've had several people on the podcast lately that are either in organizations or that lead organizations that do that. And I've also had several people on the podcast that were incarcerated themselves and came out and then you know uh changed their lives and shared their story
Yeah.
on the podcast. Fascinating stories. And so I have a big my heart goes out to a lot of those folks. So I know your mom must be a very passionate, caring person to do that
She
kind of
really,
work.
she really is. She really is. She went to school for social work. And so I think a lot of the work that
Okay.
she did as a probation officer was to make sure that people had someone to call when they were,
Yes.
astray, or when they needed some support or help. And so, yeah, I think her job, walked a line of, making sure that, folks were, doing the things that they needed to do so they could get back to get back to
Mhm.
their lives, and also making sure that they had the resources to do so. And I know that's
Yes.
always been a really strong passion of hers. I'm seeing that even as she's entered kind of the county work in the public defender's office. It's coming to life in a new way,
Yeah.
which is really cool for her at this stage of her career. But she is so passionate. I think if she wasn't, she didn't do the work that she does now, I think she would make a phenomenal teacher.
Ah,
She's just I can't even say like a bleeding heart, because I really do think like she really knows how to compartmentalize, and you kind of have to with that kind of career. But yeah, she's a really empathetic person, and a problem solver. I think
cool.
that's really key in any kind of career like that.
That's awesome. Were you the perfect kid? Were you the straight A student, never in trouble at the library every day? Or was there any rebel stepping out and getting a little crazy in there? What's going on, Alex?
No, I was pretty straight laced.
Yeah.
My parents were very strict,
Were
but
they?
I also just, yeah. I mean, they had really high expectations of me, and I think part of it is because both of them came from pretty humble beginnings and knew that the
Okay.
path out of that cycle is education, and the path out of that cycle is support. And having the like wraparound support from community and from family. And so my parents were really, really committed to my education, which made me really passionate about that work. I think, personally, I'm a 3 on the Enneagram. If that means anything to you, I'm an achiever, and an ENFJ in the Myers Briggs. So I'm very extroverted. I'm a big
Cool. Cool.
feeler. And so a lot of those things like really impacted my life as I grew up, was really wanting to succeed, and A's were A's were the expectation, and I certainly delivered. It wasn't without like struggle. Sometimes there are definitely subjects that I did better than others. I like really excelled in English, but really did not do super well in math. But I like found the resource. I think that's like one thing when I used to like coach new freshmen in college, when I was kind of a junior senior.
Ah,
People would start to struggle with these courses, and I would say like the University of Minnesota has the most resources like that you could ever ask for. So if you are not, and they're free, so like if you are not utilizing the resources of the University of Minnesota, like you're not taking full advantage of your tuition. And so like find the writing center, find the career center,
ah,
find the
okay.
advisors who can help you along the way. I think, I didn't do this, alone. I just certainly didn't start a business alone. I have 3 other co-founders, but I also have a ton of mentors and supportive advisors who've been with me along the way and at different journeys, different parts of my journey. So I think that's like one thing that I always coach people on is like there are resources out there. You just have to find them and then not be afraid to ask for help.
Right.
Um, Yeah,
Very
I
good.
think that's how I got through math.
Tell
Was
me,
asking for help.
tell me about the lacrosse, at Minnesota. Did you play? Did you coach? Were you just part of the organization? What's the status there?
Yeah, oh, good question. I don't get asked a lot about the sports that I played, but so I played basketball growing up. I did gymnastics growing up. And at some point, my dad was my coach for basketball. And at some point, I think I was like, I need to do something on my own.
Okay.
And so I picked the most obscure sport you could possibly pick in Minnesota because, like, it was brand new when I was in high school. And so I picked lacrosse, and I made the University of Minnesota women's lacrosse team. It's a club team because D1 lacrosse for women in the Midwest didn't exist.
I see.
And so I played competitively on
Cool.
that team. I can't say I was like particularly like the best player or anything like that. I was definitely like a workhorse player. Um, but I like was on kind of the leadership team as I grew up there, and just I really loved the sport. I loved
That's awesome.
the cardio of it. I loved the teamwork of it, and the women who were a part of it. I think because it was so new in Minnesota,
Uh,
it was one of those things that like if you wanted to play, you had to work for it. Like you had
mm,
to fundraise, you had to, find your own jerseys, you had to like do all of the administrative pieces of it. And I think maybe that was like an inkling of entrepreneurship there, where it was like, hey,
uh,
like this thing doesn't exist and we want it to
okay.
be true. So let's vision and make it happen.
Cool. I appreciate the fact that you have that on your LinkedIn profile. I encourage, as a recruiter for a living, I encourage candidates like, hey, if you played sports or athletics, or you were involved in organizations or student government or whatever, like put that on your LinkedIn profile. It shows
Yeah,
teamwork, you're volunteering, you're coachable, people skill. I mean, all of it, right? So
absolutely.
I always encourage people to put that on their profiles. I love the fact that it's on yours.
Thanks.
Okay. So coming out of school, did you know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or you thought, no, I'm going to be like the head of communications for a big company? What was your plan?
Well, I had a lot of plans. So when I went into college, I really wanted to be a theater major because I wanted to be
Oh,
a show producer
I
and I
see.
wanted to own a theater and run a
Oh,
theater.
cool.
And then I took my first theater class in college, which was very different than theater in high school. And I was like, oh my God, I can't do this. It was just
Why?
it was so intense. And
Uh,
I
okay.
think a lot of the people who are like were a part of that program wanted to be actors. And so like I was more interested in kind of the administrative piece of it or the
I see.
kind of back office piece of it. And in order to get to that, you had to also do a lot of the acting with a lot of the
Okay.
actors. And I was like, I don't know that these are my people, you know what I mean? Like they were in high school. It's just like it's like a different level of intensity and
Gotcha.
the drama of it all. So,
Okay.
so while I still really appreciate theater, I love the arts and love supporting theater. I switched majors to journalism.
Okay.
I had written for my high school paper, and so there's a lot of crossover between the creativity that's in producing a theater show and the creativity that's involved in creating news
Mhm.
and making sure that it's readable and that people are interested in reading what it is that you have to say and share with the community. So I started in kind of the J school and then picked the PR track because I really enjoyed
Okay.
like event production. I enjoyed my first job was like catering. So I really enjoyed that. I did a lot of my first like one of my first internships was at a wedding planning company and
Yeah.
another was at a wedding magazine. So I had a lot of like experience kind of in the event space and PR was kind of adjacent to that. And so I had like 7 internships in college. Like I said, like
Great.
I was really resourceful. I
Uh,
love
that's
like
great.
learning,
Yeah.
trying. I think the best thing for college students to do is to test and learn and hopefully even find
Absolutely.
what you don't like.
I
I
couldn't.
didn't like working
Yeah.
in a
Yes.
newsroom.
Yes. I could not agree more. And that's a good place for us to take a pause for the listeners,
Yeah.
especially the young folks. Like, yes, the internships are great for networking and making connections that might be able to help you later. But even more importantly, well, I don't know if it's more importantly, but in addition to the networking, yeah, it helps you decide what you don't want to do. What
For sure.
you thought you might have wanted to do that, and you do an internship, and you're like, no, I guess I don't really like that. So
Yeah, yeah. The
it's wonderful.
newsrooms were like too stressful, and the wedding planning was like weekends. So you kind of like find your thing.
Mhm.
And so after
Yes.
a while, I kind of landed on PR, and my first internship out of college was in a PR agency here in the Twin Cities called Carmichael Lynch Spong at the time.
Okay.
Now it's called Carmichael Lynch Relate. And after about, I would say, I think I was there for like 6 or 8 months, and then decided to move on to advertising. And so I got a job. My first job, first full paid non internship job, was as an account executive at Fallon, which is one of the most creative agencies I think in the world. I think they were
Cool.
at the time were pretty large. One of the most well-known ones here in the Twin Cities, and
Yeah.
they have such a huge reach, a giant creative team. They work really strategically, and then have folks from all over the world who have been a part of their different teams. And so it was really interesting to me. And in fact, my first client in that role was Latin America, Purina. And so I was doing like dog food in Spanish, which I was a Spanish minor
I
in
saw
college.
that.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that, they were like, oh, you must speak Spanish. I was like, I speak very little Spanish. And I remember my very first day, um, I think I understand Spanish way more than I speak it. I
I
think
got you.
it's just a confidence issue. And so, my very first day on the job, one of the founders of Fallon, Fred, came to my desk and he said, "Hey, I've got this nonprofit website that we're doing pro bono work on. Can you help translate it?" And I went, uh-huh, yeah, I can do
Yeah.
that. And so I called my best friend Yuri, who I graduated with. She was in my wedding, and she speaks fluent Spanish. She's a native Spanish speaker. So I
Mhm.
called her and was like, okay, here's what I'm thinking. And she helped me translate the
Pretty
website.
funny.
So
That's good.
I'll forever be grateful for Yuri and her help that day. But it again kind of leads into like that maybe entrepreneurial spirit where you're like, well, I don't know, but I think I'll figure it out.
Pretty good. You were there for at Fallon for almost 6 years. Tell me what happened. How did you, and I knew you were involved in some other volunteer stuff and some other board stuff, it looks like, but how did you make the transition to Covet?
Yeah.
Talk to me. Yeah, how did it happen?
Yeah, well, kind of naturally and then all at once. So it was I accelerated really quickly in the agency. And I
Okay.
think part of it was because I assimilated to what the agency needed and asked for. So, which
Okay.
the dominant culture in advertising agency is white and male.
Okay.
And there were a lot of women who were working to change that, myself included, my co-founders of the Coven included.
Okay.
But as I got married pretty young, I was 24. I had kids. I had my first kid at 25. So like pretty young for the agency world, which
I
is
see.
typically like you prioritize your career until you're 35, and then maybe you decide to get married or have kids or never. And if you do have kids, then at the time it was like you kind of became irrelevant, because a lot of times you would, or irrelevant in the eyes of the agency. It was like, well, you can't do these things. Like
Uh,
if you're not going to prioritize work, then, you know, too bad. And because it is a client service business, everything is in service of the client and everything is urgent. And so when you have a kid who has fever, it's sometimes hard to like prioritize getting to the kid because your client is also
yeah.
has a advertising emergency, which I say in quotes because there are no emergencies in advertising. um, but I think the challenge, I think, for women in that industry at the time was that, we kind of got to a level like mid-level or director level and then kind of capped out. It was like you
Okay.
either became too old or you had kids. And so then you were going to opt out of the industry and go
Yeah.
to the client side where there was maybe a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah.
And there certainly weren't very many people of color in leadership roles,
Okay.
or in kind of entry level positions. I was one of very few Black women in my agency and in the Twin Cities industry. Really, there weren't many of us.
Okay.
And so there was this movement, if you're familiar with Lean In, from Sheryl Sandberg,
Uh,
for women to kind of like, you know, lead and step in. And, you know, I think what I took away from the Lean In movement were a few things. One, Lean In like leaned too hard into, well, women have to change. Women have to like do extra work, and women should, like act like men in order to advance in their careers. And I think it after kind of I subscribed to it for a minute, and then it was kind of like, wait a minute, like the industry should change actually. Like we shouldn't have to sleep under our desks and shower at work. We shouldn't have to, abandon our families for an advertising emergency. Like I feel like there were so many things that we were making accommodations for in order to stay in the industry, and it was having like an impact on our mental health, on our relationships with family and friends, on our ability to parent and raise families. And I think where it really hit me was when I had my daughter.
okay.
And so I had my son first, and I started to kind of participate in some of these activities around and kind of leading these organizations that were working to get more women and people of color into the industry. And when I had my daughter, I was kind of looking at her being like, I don't think I could, I can't have this place be where I'm at all the time. Like I need you to see me thrive. And I was
Ah,
not thriving in the
I see. Oh,
industry.
all right.
You need your kids to see you like see you thrive and enjoy what you do. And I think, at the time, my co-founder Erin tells this story all the time. How I was at her house one day, and I came like just like kind of storming into her living room, and I was like, Erin, like I found out today that when I started at Fallon 5 years ago, I was paid exactly what the ratio is of white women to Black women. In my like I was literally like paid like 60 cents on the dollar, whatever the stat is. It's like 60 or 70 cents on the dollar.
Because of color or because of male versus female?
This was women. This was like
I see.
color.
I
So
see.
this would have been had to do with race.
Wow.
And we were both equal. We were both like brand new, fresh out of college, first internship. And then like we started like this. And it just, it like continues to grow, right? So
Wow.
like that chasm continues to grow. And even though
Wow.
I was in a leadership position, I was paid I think relatively fair. I look at like what my peers are being paid, and you're like, wait a minute, like this is there's a gap here, and we all have the same experience, or maybe in certain circumstances I've proven myself to be worthy of that raise. And
Were you already?
there's
I just want to ask you. Sorry, I don't want to
yeah.
interrupt because I'm trying to think of. In my mind, my mind is racing about what I would have done, like how I would have reacted, because I would have been super pissed.
Yeah.
Did you did you like call somebody? Did you go see somebody? You're like, yo, man, hey, what's this is not cool. Like, did you confront anybody? I'm just curious because I'm thinking I would have had a big reaction to that. I don't know what I would have done,
Yeah.
but
So there were a few things that were happening at the same time. In 2016, my co-founders of the Coven and I had like kind of started to get together and start to build this idea of the Coven. We were like meeting at the library, like the county library, and
I
like
see.
reading books on entrepreneurship and figuring out what we
Okay,
were going to build together. So that was happening at the same time that
okay,
I found this out. Also,
but you were still working there. You were still
I
working
was
there.
still working.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
I
right,
was still
all right,
working there.
all right.
And then also, I had started to take on some freelance work on the side that was around political advocacy. So I was working on a couple of campaigns, a mayoral campaign for Minneapolis
Okay,
and a city council campaign for Minneapolis. So I was doing some like side work there. This is
okay.
like the start of me doing too many things. And then on top of that,
Uh,
I was starting to get some feedback from like 360 reviews, and this was maybe in the spring of 2017.
oh,
Um,
they did 360 reviews there. You might want to tell the audience what that is in case they don't know, by the way, real
Sure.
quick.
Yeah. Well, 360 review is where they kind of interview a number of people, or people take a survey, all sorts of people who interact with you. So it would be like your boss, anybody who direct reports to you, people who you're peers with, people across departments. And they all kind of give input on the same
Right.
scale. And then you get a chance to review that with your boss.
Yeah, and
You
it's
don't
all
necessarily like,
confidential. You don't know who said what
well,
most of the time.
apparently,
Most
most
of
of
the
the time. I mean, I suppose some of the comments you could be like, wait a minute.
time.
I think I know who said that.
Yeah.
Um, But so in the 360 review that I got in 2017, and at this time I was the communications director for the agency. So I was doing PR for the agency.
Okay.
And one of the things that came out was like people were saying that I was too self-promoting and that I had too much of an opinion and my voice was like too loud. And this is after years of kind of assimilating and like having reviews that said like you could do to say more about your opinion and you're too quiet. And so all of a sudden I like found my voice and they didn't like it. And again, like they were like, you're too self-promoting. I'm like, that's kind of my job, is to be the like a voice for the agency as the PR person. I am supposed to be talking to press. I am trying to get you recognized for your work. And so there was a lot of like dissonance. And I think I was starting to put the pieces together that it wasn't that my voice was too loud. It was just they didn't like my voice. And that I had found it. And I think the more I was aware of my own power, the more it felt maybe threatening to certain people in the agency. And this isn't to say like the whole agency sucks. Like I really appreciate a lot of the people who are there. And I think it's more of an industry issue, right? So this isn't just like a one place problem. This is an entire industry issue at the time. And so while all of these things are happening, I had a meeting with a founder, and this kind of gets to like what I was talking about before, is having like advisors and other people who you can tap for resources. Yes. But I had a conversation with another founder who we were very early in Coven stages. Like we're just kind of getting the business plan put together.
Just the plan. No, you hadn't like filed for the LLC. The entity wasn't created or anything. Just still idea phase. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and so it was like the day that I got that 360 review, and I happened to have coffee with this guy named Thompson Adder and Comey. He owns a company called Nice Healthcare. If you don't know about it, you should go check it out. It's based here in the Twin Cities.
Cool.
And I sat down with Thompson. He introduced me to the Montana Gold tea, which I'll like forever. That's my favorite tea. But he was like, I'm like telling him about what's going on with the Coven and like what we're trying to build and what we're thinking about. I told him about the 360 review and just how like devastated I was that like the work that I was doing wasn't appreciated, and that I felt like I had like gotten to the top, right? I was at the leadership table, but it wasn't a place that I really felt welcome. And he said, "You have to quit your job." I was like, "Huh?" And he's like, "You really have to quit your job because you're doing all these other things. Like you started consulting with political clients, and that is like taking off and it's going well, and you're getting filled up by that work. You feel like you have a purpose. You have this new idea that I know is going to be successful. I can feel it in my bones." Like
that's
he
nice.
just gave me such affirmation. And it gave me such affirmation that
that's
like,
great.
Oh, this is not for me anymore. Like I absolutely learned a ton from that part of my professional career.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like the push out the door that I really needed to say, hey, like, I need to close this chapter so that I can open something new and really go all in. And so at that moment, that was probably the spring of 2017. It was kind of the culmination of all of those things, which allowed me to really take a full leap into the Coven, a full leap into my consulting work, which paid the bills for years.
I was just about to ask you. I'm assuming when you guys started the Coven, you weren't getting paid a lot of money right away.
No, but we were working around the clock. Like, I mean, we were cleaning toilets, opening the space, closing the space, hosting events. It was a wild, wild ride those first couple of years, especially those first 6 months of opening the Coven. But even the 6 months before of opening the Coven, while we were kind of raising a little bit of capital, we did some crowdfunding. Where kind of we resourced from our community. We pre-sold founding memberships essentially so that we could have some cash on hand in order to pay rent when the doors opened. But it was very tenuous, right? It was like, we don't have a space yet. We're asking people to pay for a thing that doesn't exist. We are kind of like faking it till we make it, but we know that like if this didn't work out, we would pay everybody back. Like there was just these so many chicken egg moments. I think if you're an entrepreneur, you understand that greatly. It's like when do you spend the money? When do you hire the people? When do you make the leap? When do you sign the lease? Like all of those were questions that we were asking between, I would say, June of 2017 all the way through opening day on March 9th of 2018.
Did you and your co-founder, is there just two co-founders?
Four of us.
Did all four of you put in a little cash as well, or did you bootstrap and raise from friends and family and angel
Yeah.
money, or was it a mix? Yeah.
Yeah. So in 2017, we just did crowdfunding, and then we all put in sweat equity. So
Okay.
we were all kind of like working for free
Okay.
to make this thing happen. We
Yep.
raised $350,000
Oh,
via
nice.
crowdfunding, which
Okay.
is
Cool.
the most ever raised on the iFund Women platform, which is a crowdfunding platform specifically for women-owned businesses.
Nice. Congratulations. Was that
Thank you.
primarily used for the construction and the build out, or what was that used for?
Yeah, construction, build out furniture.
Okay.
It was for like
Yep.
first couple of months of rent. We
Yep.
really had like maybe 6 months of run. I would say we had like 12 months of runway when we first opened the doors. But we
Let me
got to cash
guess.
flow positive within 12 months. So
Oh,
I
you
mean, it was,
did. Oh, wow.
yeah,
Whoa. Okay.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Now, was that cash flow positive and paying yourself, or cash flow positive still not paying yourself?
So we brought in a general manager, and this kind of gets to why we've moved to a franchise model,
I
but I
see.
can talk about that a little bit
Okay.
later.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah, we brought in a general kind of like a couple of staff that first year to help kind of start to take over. So we were paying, what we would have paid ourselves. We were paying other people
Because
to do the
and
day to
because
day.
because all of you were still doing other little side gigs or consulting or whatever to
Totally. Two of us were in the business full time, and then two people had other like full time jobs.
yeah. Okay.
And then, but all of us had consulting things that we were kind of piecing together. This
I
whole
get it.
thing, I think, being an entrepreneur, like especially women, I think a lot of times when you look at entrepreneurship or like the stories of entrepreneurship, it's like, well, this guy just like quit his job and like slept in
Mm,
his car and like made this happen. And the reality is, it's like, if you have a family, if you have a obligations, if you have like a house, if you have a loan, like if you live in an apartment, like whatever it is that you
mm-hmm.
have, like
Yep.
you still have to pay the bills.
That's
And
right.
so whenever I hear investors talk about how like they want their founders to be like all in, and they have
hmm
to quit their other thing, I'm looking at them going like, but with what money will they be living?
Right.
And one another like advisor, like someone that we've met along the way, they gave us this advice around like, pay yourself eventually, like when your business is able to sustain it, pay yourself enough so that you're not worried every day, so that like that financial burden that is like constantly in the back of your mind is not gnawing at you. Now that takes like discipline and cash flow discipline and
hmm
knowledge of finances and a really good accountant and like some really good like good folks around you. But
Yeah.
that's kind of how we've subscribed, and it hasn't always been the case, right? It kind of ebbs and flows with the way that money has
Sure.
gone with the pandemic. I mean, that was a huge thing. We didn't pay ourselves for 2 years after the pandemic. Like, there's been a few moments where we couldn't pay ourselves, but in
I'm
the moments
sure.
that we in the
I'm
moments that we could, we really, really try to do it in a way that's like thoughtful so that we can focus on the business to continue
Now,
to grow it.
for the listeners, you started it in 2017, and then
Yeah.
the pandemic comes March. So I'm just gonna guess. I'm gonna guess. Tell me how off I am. Late 19, early January, February of 2020, you guys are like, wow, okay, we're starting to like this actually this might work. Like we're gonna be okay. Boom, the pandemic comes, and you're like, holy shit. Okay, now
Yeah,
there
that's
had
exactly what we said. Holy shit was the word. Took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah.
and then you're like laying in bed at night going, oh man, okay, what is I guess I could go get my communications director job back. What am I going to do? Because this, right? You had to have had those moments, I'm sure.
We had so many moments like that. I think so we opened our second location in January of 2020. So before we knew about the
Oof,
pandemic.
oof, oof, oof.
Um 2019 was a really like strange year for us. We were fundraising, so we raised like a
Okay.
little pre-seed round.
Okay.
And we went to Silicon Valley for 12 weeks and
Oh,
did
you
a
did.
whole
Oh,
like
cool. I bet
accelerator
that
out
was a great
there.
experience, probably, huh?
Great learning experience. But on the first day I got on the plane with my co-founder Bethany in August of 2019, and WeWork's S1 had just come out that day. And as we're reading their S1, which if you don't know, they IPO'd or they attempted to IPO in 2019, and their S1, which is basically like their entire like balance sheet, and they talk about, you know, how the growth of the business and whatever. It was a mess. It was like,
Yep.
it was insane. It basically said like, we've been burning money, like just throwing it out the window and lighting it on fire and hosting giant, you know, parties and whatnot for millions and millions of dollars. And like, don't you want to invest in us? And I was like, oh my God. And so we're a co-working space. And so to have that type of like that weight on our shoulders as we're walking into these like basically Shark Tank type rooms, where folks are like laughing us out of the room, essentially being like, what about WeWork? Like, you guys are just like a lady WeWork, you know, like nobody could really put their heads around how we were going to be different than them, or how we are different than them. And we just kept pushing, like, we're profitable. Like we have a profitable model. Like, we can make money. We know how to do this. We know how to grow. We know inclusion. We know how to build a space that is more than just desks. And so that was a really like tough moment. But we had momentum. I mean, we had momentum. We had some money, and we were building towards St. Paul opening, and our St. Paul, which is our second location, opened late January of 2020. We hosted a huge event on March 9th of 2020.
March
It was
9th. Wow.
which is also the first day that COVID hit Minnesota, or that there was like a recorded case in Minnesota.
Wow.
So I'm like, I get on Twitter, and there's like or Twitter at the time, now it's X, but I get on Twitter and I see there's the first reported case in Minnesota, and there's 300 people in my space. And I'm like, huh, okay, well, like, do we just like not touch each other, or like, you know, don't look at anyone, or like, do I wipe down all the surfaces?
Yeah, what
you
do
know,
we
like,
do now? Yeah.
we had no idea. So we had that event on the
Oh,
9th. On the 10th, we had 1,500 people in a at a like huge market. I mean, it's just like a huge celebration. It was International Women's Day. We were celebrating Women's History Month. And then that like following Tuesday, we shut our spaces down and like didn't reopen for 5 months. So it was wild.
Wow. The fact that you
It
guys made
was
it, the fact that
wild.
you guys made it through that, congratulations. Right now is probably a good time for us to give an overview of the Coven. Is, by the way, for the listeners, it's thecoven.com is the website.
Yeah.
Give us the for the listeners, give us the elevator pitch real quick, and tell the listeners about the Coven, if you don't mind, Alex. Now's probably a good time.
Yeah, so the Coven is a co-working community designed for belonging. And so we really think about how do you create physically and psychologically safe environments for all people to be a part of. We really center all of our experiences, being that events, programming, in-person co-working, around women, non-binary, and trans folks. But we are open to all genders. And so what's really beautiful about the space is it's really made with our most marginalized people in mind, but it's for everyone. And I think when people walk into the space, they feel like, wow, the space feels like mine. You know, we have men who walk in the space and go, I've never been in a place that smells so good, or like a place that, you know, is really caring for me as an individual, workplace like that. And so we, on top of that, offer digital programming around leadership development and entrepreneurship that's accessible to all anyone, regardless of whether you're in the physical community or not. And we're growing by franchising, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier. So, meaning that you can open up a Coven community in your neighborhood, and a place where you feel like needs a space for inclusion and co-working.
Very nice. What made you decide to go the franchise route? How'd that come about?
So a couple of things. So one, you know, I mentioned kind of cash flow with the operations of a space. It is, and you see this with WeWork, and a lot of co-working spaces are talking about this. Like, it is not kind of like a set it and forget it kind of investment, right? It is something that you have to continuously fill seats. You have to continuously fill memberships. Think of it more like a gym. And so we were looking at how memberships across a number of industries work. And the franchising model allows you to be really community centric, which is what our business is all about. Us like plopping, you know, Covens everywhere that are owned and operated here in the Twin Cities, but are existing in other places, don't allow like the level of care and resource support that entrepreneurs really need on the ground. So part of that strategy is really to find folks who are community driven, are kind of people capital investors in their communities, and allowing them to open up their own spaces with the backing and infrastructure and marketing support from headquarters. So it's been a really cool journey. We have 3 franchisees already. We just started doing this in the last year.
That have opened or are in process of opening?
We have 2 open and 1 opens in 2024. So we have 5 locations, which is really awesome.
That's great. So 2 company owned and 3 franchise locations so far is what it'll be.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
I'm guessing you guys own the real estate and the franchise just owns the operation, or no?
Say that again.
I'm guessing that on the franchise model is corporate owns the real estate, owns the building, and then, how are you doing that?
No. So that is of interest to us down the road right now, because we are really focused on just supporting the entrepreneurs. The majority of people who have come in, or all of the people who've come in as franchisees so far, own their own buildings. And so they've been looking for, what do I do with this building?
Oh, I see.
Commercial real estate is like bananas right now.
Exactly. Okay.
So it's a really great opportunity to fill those spaces. We lease our spaces. And so I think that's a big opportunity. We're hearing from a lot of entrepreneurs across the country who are interested in leasing. And so we're having both conversations with folks about how can we create kind of a diverse group of entrepreneurs who operate their spaces on a number of different levels.
I see. Boy, we could talk about this whole lease, the commercial real estate business. We could do a whole hour episode on this topic based on everything that's going on. So the 2 corporate locations, those are leases. You guys didn't buy those buildings. So okay.
Correct. Yeah, we didn't have enough capital to do that. And on top of that, then you're a landlord, and that's a whole other business model.
Yeah, the commercial real estate, I don't know, man. I don't know about commercial. I don't know right now, but what I do know is these office buildings that have lost companies because people are working from home or working remotely or whatever, they are going to need options to convert or transition into something else if they're sitting empty. And here you are now supplying an option, right? I think
absolutely.
Okay. Very good.
Absolutely.
Very good. Does it scare you what happened to WeWork and filing bankruptcy and all this stuff? Does that bother you? What do you, when your investors call you nervous about, hey man, did you hear what happened to WeWork? What are you guys saying?
Well, I don't think it scares us. I think any startup is, and when I think about startups, I'm not talking about WeWork, but any startup has some level of fear. If you're an entrepreneur and you have no fear, you're doing something wrong. Every day you wake up and you go, every day I
wake up. My wife always says, even if we're having a good month, I'm still nervous. And my wife's like, we're having a great month. What's your problem? I'm like, we own a business. I'm scared every day. What are you talking about?
Yeah, well, and you have a responsibility to your employees. You have a responsibility to the people, your customers. There's so much responsibility involved. So yes, there is always some level of fear. And when you hear the word bankruptcy, and when you see a large player like that, hey, someday we hope to grow to be large. Mm-hmm. But the way that they grew didn't make sense. They grew with a lot of leases. They grew with a lot of debt. They grew with a lot of too much rapid growth. If you've ever been in New York, in the height of WeWork, it was there was a WeWork on every block. It was essentially a subway. I don't understand how that would have been sustainable. And we saw that in 2019 when the S1 came out. We saw that when we first started opening. We looked ahead and went they're growing too quickly. And we could feel that. I think the only way they were able to do that was because they had just goo gobs of money that they were just leveraging and leveraging debt and assets. But the reality is one group that has done a really good job of growth, or a different kind of growth, is Industrious, and they're growing with they're doing asset management. Instead of a traditional lease, they're doing percentage of revenue or management contracts, and lots of different ways to structure how they're doing commercial real estate with commercial real estate developers. And so it's something that we're looking at as we coach our franchisees on what are the best leasing strategies. It might not actually be a traditional lease, but it could be a percentage of revenue. It could be a contract where it's essentially you're the building manager and filling all of those spaces. So it's a wild west, but I think honestly on the co-working side of things, we actually have a lot to leverage because we have all of the people and the building owners need the people to fill their space. And so there's a
Yes.
lot of like, I think there's a lot of upside. I think the cautionary tale of WeWork is, you know, when you like grow to be a bajillion-dollar plus company, like there's got to be something up with that where you're like, well, wait a minute, like what
Mm.
do you actually own? And a lot of it was like nothing. And so I
Mm-mm.
think the fact that we're growing in this way, we've seen a lot of successful franchise type businesses that are able to grow thoughtfully, are able to grow in community, are able to grow with other entrepreneurs. I think the benefit of it is that we get to tap the knowledge of local players and that it's not just us. And so kind of back to that, you know, community aspect of my life, and what I really value is the knowledge of others. And so we get to tap into kind of the resources that exist in other communities that we wouldn't get to do if we just owned all of the spaces.
Got you. You're actively looking for franchisees right now?
Yes, we are. And we've had so many wonderful conversations with people from across the country. We're in active conversations with 30 different states. And so if
Cool.
in your community you're interested in opening a space like the Coven, it's, you know, between 6 and 8,000 square feet is what we're looking for.
Okay.
We're looking for people who are entrepreneurs. If you own a building, that's a great way to utilize and fill your space. We provide all of the infrastructure, the technology backing, the marketing and assets that you need, the library of resources. And then you get us, like we're all marketers. We all come from advertising background, and the benefit of having kind of a nationally recognized Fortune Inc., all kinds of things, and really building the future of work.
Let me ask you, I don't know how much to eat, and I know we're bumping up on our time here, but real quickly,
Okay.
do they just need to go to thecoven.com and then fill out the contact us page, or what do you prefer for people
Yeah,
interested to get in?
you can check out thecoven.com/franchise. There's a downloadable PDF there that walks
Okay.
through kind of the timeline of franchising and what it looks like and some of the cost implications and things. And then we have a form right in there that you can tell us a little bit about yourself and about your community and why you want to open a coven. We talk to everyone who submits that form. So as long as you're willing to have the conversation, fill it out and learn a little bit more.
Very good. One more question. I guess the cost to get started really is going to depend on the build out and what's already
For
there,
sure.
right? If it's a shell versus what is it? What was it? I mean, that's going to vary pretty widely, I would think.
It really does. And if you buy a building or you own a building, that's different. You know, if you walk into a building that is like turnkey, which there's a lot of real estate out there right now that are just empty offices, which already have offices built out, already have
Mhm.
restrooms plumbed,
Mhm.
kitchens, those
Mhm.
types of
Mhm.
things. So I would say, like, if you're looking, like, look for those types of properties that are kind of desolate and open and available. But
That's
our franchise fee is 50,000 to get involved, and then it's 10% gross revenue monthly. So it's a pretty like reasonable entry rate. And then
are
again, just
you
depends on the market.
are you open to negotiating that 50 grand? Can they pay it out over time, or they got to write the check up front?
Well, right now we write the check we write the check up front, and it allows us to, you know, pour into you with our resources.
Okay. Um, I do think for the listeners, I'm not a commercial real estate expert, but I have a lot of friends that are, and I think there's opportunity here. I think there's some low hanging fruit. I think when the interest rates pop and some of these interest rates swing up on some of these people that are in these commercial buildings and they lose them, or they have to file bankruptcy or walk away from these office buildings, there's somebody's chance to swoop in, grab that space, then call you, open up the coven, boom, they're off to the races and probably got a pretty good
Absolutely.
deal, I would think.
I think so too. Yeah, I really do think so. And those are some of the conversations, most of the conversations we're having right now are with building owners
Okay,
who are like,
good,
come
good.
help us design this
Yep.
thing.
Yes. Yes. No doubt, because
Yeah.
I can guarantee you there are commercial owners right now sitting in empty spaces, thinking to themselves, "Holy crap, what are we going to do?" And so,
And there's kind of this owner operator model, right? So like you could be the building owner and hire a general manager, or you
yeah,
could be the building owner and have a
mm,
partner, a business partner who wants to operate the space every day. Because
right,
typically it's like the building owner is like, I don't want to run the co-working space.
yeah.
But if you can find a franchisee to do it and help support them in their growth, or bringing on a general manager to really run the day to day of the space. There's lots of ways to work this, and we've seen it in all like differently in all three of our franchisees. So it's great to have some good learnings, and we're happy to share more.
The franchises that opened, are they in Minnesota or out of state?
We have two in Minnesota and one in Wisconsin that just opened a couple weeks ago. And that was actually an existing co-working space that rebranded. And so they were able to open within like just a couple of months of signing the contract, and we were able to get them up and running pretty quick.
Pretty cool. I'm going to ask you a funny question because when I looked up the coven, because I actually didn't know that. Shame on me for being ignorant of this. I was showing my Oklahoma education here. I didn't know the coven stood for the gathering or the grouping or gathering of people. But when I looked it up, it said the old school definition was the gathering of something with witches, gathering of witches back in the old day. And I read, I'm looking at Google. I'm like, what? Really? Okay. Well,
it's a little witchy.
Yeah. And I was thinking, so
if you look at our logo, it's a V, but if you flip it upside down, it's a witch hat.
So I didn't even catch that. That's so funny.
It's kind of fun. It's a little tongue in cheek. And so the word coven comes from the word to convene or to gather. And so we really do believe in the power and energy and magic when people come together in community. And we don't mind that it has a little bit of teeth. I think it's a bit self-selecting.
I thought it was cool. I mean, I thought it was cool. Like, seriously, I was like, oh, well, that's kind of neat. I wonder what the story is. I wonder that it made me immediately go, okay, what's going on here? I didn't catch the hat though with the V. Damn it, I should have caught.
Kind of like a fun little like quiet. If you know, you know.
Cool, cool. All right, I like it. Alex, congratulations on everything you guys are doing. And surviving COVID. Now you're gonna pick up some of the scraps left behind by WeWork and probably open up some more locations, which I think there's going to be some opportunity for you there. Congrats to you and your co-founders, your other three co-founders, and the investors. Nice job.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate it. It was great to chat with you.